Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a look at a truly chilling case. It really highlights the darker side of online interactions and, well, human vulnerability. We're diving deep into what are known as the Richard Beasley Craigslist murders in Ohio. For this deep dive, we pulled from news articles, mainly from the time of the trial, and these really give us a front row seat to the unfolding legal drama and the stark realities of the case. So our mission today is to unpack how this predatory scheme unfolded, who got caught in its web, and also the surprising complexities that came up during the trial, especially, concerning the defense's efforts to understand the perpetrator. Okay, let's unpack this. So at the core of this horrific scheme was Richard Beasley. Our sources describe him as a self-styled street preacher, and back in 2011, he basically exploited a very specific need. He used bogus job offers, posted them on Craigslist, to lure men described as down and out to a supposed farm in Ohio.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here, and deeply disturbing, is how precisely he targeted specific vulnerabilities. You mentioned down-and-out men, and our sources show the victims Ralph Geiger, 56, David Pauley, 51, and Timothy Kern, 47. They were all described as looking for a fresh start in life.
Right.
So the lure itself, jobs on a vast, isolated property in Noble County that played directly into their desperation, their hopes, and that isolation of the supposed job site that just adds another layer of, well, danger.
And the outcome was just horrific. 3 of those men were murdered, and a 4th was shot and wounded.
Oh.
Now, their 4th man, Scott Davis, he was 48 at the time, 49 by the trial. He turned out to be absolutely critical in stopping this, didn't he? Can you walk us through what happened to him? Why was his survival so pivotal?
Oh, absolutely pivotal. Davis's experience was harrowing, to say the least, but his actions were, without doubt, the turning point. He described being shot in the arm as he walked in front of Beasley at that supposed job site. He heard the click of the gun and just reacted. Pure instinct. Knocked the weapon aside, fled into the woods, and managed to call the police. That call, November 6th, 2011, that's what brought the whole scheme crashing down.
Just incredible presence of mind.
It really was. His escape basically ripped the mask off the whole operation.
Amazing he got out.
Yeah.
And once law enforcement got involved, I imagine the timeline started coming together, spanning several months, it seems.
Exactly. Authorities pieced it together. Geiger was believed killed first, August 9th, 2011.
Yeah.
Though his body wasn't found until November, which is chilling in itself.
Yeah.
Then Pauley on October 23rd, 2011. And Timothy Kern on November 13th, 2011. His body was found near the former Rolling Acres Mall in Akron.
So not all the same location then?
Right. That's another chilling detail. Kern near Akron, the others murdered at that remote southeast Ohio farm during those fake job interviews. It shows the, geographical spread of his predatory acts.
Now, Beasley didn't act alone in these crimes, did he? There was a co-defendant, Brogan Rafferty, who was just, 16 at the time?
That's right. Rafferty was his teenage accomplice. And given his age, the outcome for him was different from Beasley's. He was convicted 3 counts of aggravated murder. But because he was 16, legally too young for the death penalty in Ohio at the time, so he was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Okay, so Rafferty's fate was sealed. What about Beasley himself? The jury convicted him of murder and attempted murder. How did he respond during his own trial? What was his defense?
Well, this is where it gets pretty unbelievable. It raises that important question, right? What does it mean when a defendant presents a narrative that's just so completely contradictory to the evidence? Beasley actually got on the stand, testified he didn't kill anyone.
Seriously, after all that?
Yeah. Claimed he shot Scott Davis in self-defense. And then he even suggested, bizarrely, that others were responsible, maybe members of a motorcycle gang or something.
Wow.
It was a defense that really flew in the face of everything the prosecution presented.
Okay, so fast forward to the sentencing phase. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. The jury had recommended execution. But the judge, she still had the final say, the option to reduce it to life. And Beasley himself, his demeanor sounds quite telling. He chose not to address the judge. Just listened with his head down, in a wheelchair for back pain, apparently. No plea for mercy. So how did his defense team try to sway the jury, or rather the judge at that point?
Well, the jury recommendation was key, so the defense's effort was focused there initially, during the sentencing phase, before the final judicial sentencing, and it was a powerful attempt. His attorney, Lawrence Whitney, he really implored the jurors to spare Beasley's life. He made a crucial legal point, reminding them that the heinousness of the crimes themselves, that wasn't supposed to be the factor in recommending the sentence.
Right, the focus shifts to mitigation.
Exactly, mitigation. And to build that case, they called 3 witnesses. to try and, humanize
Oh,
Beasley.
like, who did they bring in? What kind of picture did they paint?
First was Carol Beasley, Richard's mother. She was 72. She testified, quite emotionally, that she loves Richard with all her heart. And then she described a really deeply troubled childhood for him. An absent biological father, left when Richard was just 18 months old. Then an abusive alcoholic stepfather named Jim. Physically abusive to her, Richard, his sisters, breaking things.
Oh.
She recalled him whipping young Richard with an extension cord, and she expressed this deep regret over that marriage, saying, "In retrospect, I can see I made a mistake." And then a really stark revelation. She said she'd only recently learned her son had been sexually abused by neighborhood kids when he was young.
That's incredibly difficult testimony to hear. It certainly paints a picture of a deeply troubled past. From the defense perspective, clearly designed to evoke some understanding, maybe.
That was the goal, absolutely, to provide context, a mitigating background.
So who else testified for the defense?
They called Dr. John Matthew Fabian. He's a forensic psychologist, a mitigation expert. He'd met with Beasley several times in jail. Dr. Fabian provided a clinical picture. Diagnosed Beasley with long-standing depression, actually diagnosed way back in 1980 in prison, and he'd been on medications since. Also alcohol abuse, low self-esteem, feelings of isolation, and he linked all this back to that abusive childhood, suggesting a cycle of violence in the family.
Okay.
Fabian also noted Beasley's intelligence was above average, IQ of 115. But crucially, he also diagnosed personality disorders, narcissistic tendencies, antisocial behavior, lack of empathy. And maybe the most damaging part for the defense, from their own expert. Fabian's report stated Beasley blames everyone else for his problems and crimes.
Wow. So even their own expert highlighted that blame-shifting tendency. Was there a third witness?
Yes, briefly. A church friend. They testified they'd met Beasley about 10 years before at church and kept visiting him in jail, just sort of a character witness, I suppose.
So you have this defense strategy. Paint a picture of a difficult past, psychological struggles.
Yeah.
But then you have Beasley himself blaming others, and even his own expert kind of confirming that tendency. How did the prosecution push back against this mitigation narrative?
The prosecutor, Assistant Ohio Attorney General Paul Scarcella, he countered it directly. Very effectively, it seems. He urged the jurors to look beyond the childhood trauma, as tragic as it was, focus instead on Beasley's moral culpability, his personal choices as an adult. He made the powerful point that many people from abusive homes don't grow up to kill.
Right.
And he really hammered home that detail from Dr. Fabian's own report, Beasley's tendency to blame others, essentially arguing that understanding a background doesn't excuse the horrific choices made later in life.
And ultimately, the jury wasn't swayed by the mitigation, it seems. Their decision was swift. They recommended death for Beasley, a sentence Judge Lynn S. Callahan would later formally impose. What was the reaction from the victims' families when that verdict, that recommendation, came down?
Oh, it was deeply emotional, as you can imagine. Profound relief mixed with ongoing grief. Jack Kern, Tim Gurn's father, spoke very movingly. He said that closure will begin after the sentencing. He talked about how the victims' families all stuck together through the whole ordeal, becoming like a family for us.
That's powerful.
Yeah. He also mentioned how difficult it was listening to Beasley's blatant lies during the trial, but he felt the swift verdict showed the jurors knew what was going on and ultimately made the right decision. It brought a sense of vindication for them, a step towards healing, perhaps.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean, this deep dive into the Richard Beasley case? It's just been a stark exploration, hasn't it? How easily trust can be exploited online, leading to these horrific outcomes. And we've also seen the complexities of the justice system trying to weigh, culpability against personal history. The ethical questions are huge.
Absolutely. This deep dive really highlights that tension. You have the calculated, devastating nature of the crimes on one side. Then the incredible resilience of Scott Davis, the survivor whose actions stopped more harm. And woven through it all is the legal system grappling with a perpetrator's background without minimizing the sheer severity of his actions. It's a really complex picture. It reminds us there are always layers, even in cases that seem, on the surface, purely evil.
Yeah. And this case is such a chilling lesson, isn't it? How platforms designed for connection, for opportunity like Craigslist, can be weaponized, especially against the most vulnerable, people desperate for work, for a fresh start. It really forces us to confront not just Beasley's cruelty, but maybe also the societal challenges. How do we balance digital accessibility with protecting those who are most in need? This may be a final thought for you, the listener. How do we navigate this inherent trust and anonymity of the digital age to better protect people in those moments of desperation? A stark reminder that true understanding requires grappling with both individual depravity and the summit vulnerabilities it exploits.